Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is our final panel of the first day. And this is a panel that I'm especially proud of because we have what I would consider a fantastic cross-section of all aspects of the sports industry. We have John Walsh, the godfather of ESPN, representing media, genius called by Eisner. Jenny Storms, obviously from Pepsi, but representing the sponsorship perspective, which is critically important. We have Phil, who's going to represent the agency perspective. We have Kathy coming in with the league perspective from MLS and some. And we have George, who can speak to not one team, but two teams in different leagues, as well as his experiences at the league offices. So, you know, the goal of this is we're going to have an open discussion, and I want these guys to share their perspectives on the sports industry from all the different views that they have. So let's get started. I'm going to go with age before beauty. So, Mr. Walsh.
You got age. I think I'm the oldest guy here.
Well, John, what do you think the reasons are that the industry is growing at the rate that it is from a revenue perspective, from an improved product, and from increasing consumer consumption? And do you think that can continue?
I think there are a lot of factors that are in play for the continuance of it, and it's at a critical time because of the consumer prices, because we've reached pretty much a ceiling in some areas of consumption of the sports product. I think the success of it has been actually goes back to probably the early to mid 70s, where there was a great untapped appetite for the consumption and addictive following of sports, if you will. I think the future right now is dependent upon a lot of innovative thinking that should be going into sports. And I'd like to mention a couple of areas that I think would be interesting for sports leagues and teams to consider. One of them is, you know, it's the consumer experience, whether it's on the TV sets, and thank you all for your help with your viewership of our channels. And it's also the experience at the game. And I don't think that we're thinking big enough. I think that soccer, for instance, is a sport that is on the rise in the United States, and they're thinking big about the playing surface. So in cities like Seattle, Portland, Houston, Kansas City, and Kathy tells me Toronto, Montreal, they're reshaping or building playing fields and surfaces and arena environments that are soccer friendly and soccer centric to enhance the fan experience. And I don't think that we're thinking about rule changes, for instance, rule changes that are going to make the games more exciting. Football and basketball have had the same playing surface from over 50 years. And the size of the players, if you took the average weight and size of the players in both of those sports in the 1950s and you took it in 2013, there would be a huge difference. So why aren't we considering the expansion of the field to make the game more exciting for the fan? I think that the experience at the game. Today, during the day, I heard about the information proprietary in the analytics world and how much used to be public with baseball, but now that football and basketball are involved, it becomes proprietary. Why not build your fan base for your fans of the future to try and make them the smartest people about your sport and about your team? The Houston Rockets have taken ESPN analytics guru Dean Oliver's structure of what his analytic algorithm is for winning basketball, and they put it on the jumbo screen. Sharing more information in this age of transparency would be helpful. And the last thing I would recommend for people is the idea that America loves contests, they love the idea of premium, they love the idea of upgrading. Basketball has a couple of stadiums where they take fans who are in the upper deck, and a couple fans a game get randomly picked and go in the lower. So suppose, say, baseball gave away 5 or 10 free seats down, and they took people from the upper stands, they took them down. What over an 80-game schedule, the number of people you reach over a 5-year period could be as many as 10, 20,000 people, even 40,000 people who would be talking about that, because you consider every one of those people would talk to 5 or 10 of their friends, and they would say, what a great experience this is. And I think we need to have some kind of innovative thinking for the playing of the game and the experience of the consumer.
I mean, I think it's a great point when you're speaking about, at the beginning you mentioned the inflection point for prices, specifically for consumers to attend the games. And so I'm going to direct this to you, Jenny, in particular about, a $100 million sponsorship a year and a half ago with the NFL. You know, have the consumers have reached an inflection point? Have the sponsors too?
It's a really interesting question. I think it goes back to a little bit about what John was alluding to and what your question of are nice. Thanks for the sit.
You're welcome.
Are things going to continue to rise? And what we're seeing in the industry is, I would say there's a little bit of slowing. It's not the giant jumps that you were seeing within sponsorship as far as costs, but they still are rising in appropriate places where I think the fan value is still there, and you're still seeing a lot of consumers coming to and flocking to it. So, I mean, obviously the NFL, really large industry, 181 million fans that they're, coining worldwide. So you're still talking about the rationale behind a lot of access. I think when you look at why there's so much money related to a sport like that, again, it goes a lot back to what John was just talking about, the fact that they can offer PepsiCo so many different touch points. It's not just about on the field and the experience, but not only can they offer us the touch points, but they touch and will touch 7 of our brands going into next season that we'll be partnering with them on. And where the value comes for us and why we continue to be able to sort of monetize and be able to pay the money that we're paying is because we are innovating. So you're talking a lot about make sure you do new things and really start to create new experiences. And I would say that sponsors, its onus is on us. We have to stop being a transactional partner, stop being someone that's just writing a check and trying to get our logo on something. And we have to start bringing our innovation teams and our research teams and our R&D teams to the table with a lot of these sports properties and talking to Major League Soccer and trying to make sure that you're a partnership with them and innovating and trying to bring more fan bases, more people to the table.
How have you discussed immersing yourself in the actual event itself?
The physical, like on the field, or you mean the fan experience?
Or the fan experience through television, or the fan experience at the game?
So I think it's a combination of things. One is we look at ourselves and a lot of our products at PepsiCo as endemic, and I would say you could look at beer and say that's also endemic. So I think we have a right to immerse ourselves and we have a right to partner. Whereas, if no offense to fish sticks, but if you're fish sticks, I don't know that you really have an endemic way to be part of a sports property. So we look at it this way. We go in with the media partners, we go in with all of you. We go in with the media partners, we go with the athletes, we go with the league, we go with the teams, and we try to go with each area and create those special experiences and those unique experiences. So we'll work with ESPN to do something on the field, a special vignette around Gatorade and the athletes and the fact that we're fueling performance. That's then bringing the athlete mix into it and bringing them in. We're working with the league side of it in the same general area. But I think that's the crux of it is we've got to start doing more on our end, and sponsorship has to become less about just the transaction. It has to be what you're talking about, which is the more of the immersion.
Well, I think it's a good point. I'm going to turn this over to George and Kathy because, Jenny's suggesting that the innovation needs to be coming from the sponsorship side, and here you guys are. Do you think it needs to be coming from your perspective, from the team and the league side? Or are you guys just following what, they're telling you guys?
I think that there's a huge opportunity for, I guess the question relates to revenue growth, and I think there's a huge opportunity for revenue growth in terms of teams and leagues just getting better and smarter about how they run their businesses. I was, a couple weeks ago, we had the NBA All-Star game in Houston. The Rockets were hosting with the NBA at Toyota Center. One of my favorite venues in the NBA. And I had about 10 team presidents that I had over to Minute Maid Park, and one of the most consistent themes that was coming across was just the idea of, getting better talent and getting smarter about the way that we sell and market and how big the opportunities are. So I think there's plenty of upside. I mean, teams and leagues really are tiny organizations compared to a Disney ESPN or a PepsiCo, and we just need to keep getting better at what we're doing in order to keep growing.
I think there's two parts to that that I'd answer in line with what George is talking about. I don't believe that responsibility ever rests with any one partner. I think it really is, by its very nature, a partnership, and therefore you should both come to the mix on that and constantly try to reinvent the way that you go out to the consumer. What I do believe, and I'm not sure that any of us have actually cracked the code, so to speak, yet, and I think it's probably one of the great things that are facing us, whether it be a content creator or from a distribution standpoint, or those partners that want to find their way into the nexus of that, is how best to actually change that paradigm. Because the consumer is no longer, they're consuming sports much differently than they used to. ESPN has that with the surround strategy that they've got, and ultimately fans are now multi-screen, and they're really connecting with sports in a different way. I think it's incumbent upon us as the content creator and the distribution partner to really work with our sponsors or our partners to figure out how do we actually make sure that they surround the fan themselves. And I don't believe that the old model works the same way. And so it's not just about a signage, and it's not just about an advertisement, but it's about what else can we do to surround that fan where they're going to consume our sport, whether that's in the stadium or the arena, or it's outside of that on the screen or on the multiple screens. And I'm not sure that we've actually cracked it yet. I think it's part of what we're all trying to figure out a bit.
But I think that's part of the partnership in value, right? So, and this goes back to the team side, so would love your perspective as well. When you are trying to create value, when you're playing and you're offering things and you're trying to get people to create certain consumer habits while they're inside watching the game, we have to be with you, in my opinion, and partnering with you. Your sponsors that are part of that experience as well. So whether we're partnering with you on free, it's in the 7th inning and you're going to go up and get a 2-for-1 on something that's at the food service vending because we've been working with you, or you're working with Major League Baseball Advanced Media, and the team to make sure that you have a special offer or something, but that we're understanding almost the choreography of a game and a consumer's mindset and a consumer's habits throughout that time period, and working together on how are we no longer just throwing up, the digital signage that has giant Pepsi logos all over it or Budweiser logos all over it, but that we're working with you on actually providing the value to the fan as they're sitting there, so that, again, when the revenue question comes up about ticket prices or do I want to buy this, the answer is there because we're together providing the value.
Yes, and I think that teams and leagues are moving more in the direction of truly brand building relationships that are focused on activation, where the assets, whether it's the media that you're buying or it's the sign that you're buying, it's complementary to the core part of the relationship, which is building both brands. And I think that's about having strong people that really understand how to build brands on both sides of the relationship. And we're just going about that. I mean, I was part of a group that led by Jim Crane that acquired the Astros 15 months ago. So we're in the middle of going through our entire organization. And one of the things that we're doing is adding a whole team around activation. So we'll have half a dozen people where before there really was nobody doing that job. And their job really is to be the other side of that partnership, because if Kathy at MLS is going to be able to do that, you're going to be able to do that at Pepsi. If teams want to play in a significant way and they want to be truly considered brand builders, they've got to make those investments too. They got to get smart people like the people in the room involved in helping activate those relationships.
But if we want to make really big statements about revenues and sports and where it's all going, I think we need to consider that there are really 3 ways to grow revenues. One is by raising prices, and there may not be that much price elasticity left in our traditional business models. The second is to expand and increase your consumer base, and the third is to create new content. So on the second and third, I'm extremely bullish on where sports can still go, primarily based on the fact that in America, we have 5% of the world's population, and we are known for and actually respected and admired generally for exporting our culture. So there is, as these countries develop and there are enormous middle classes being built, I think if we stay ahead of the game with media, with global brands, with leagues, with teams, et cetera, we we'll see enormous growth still to come in sports.
I
What do you
agree with
mean-
that, but sorry, go ahead, John.
What do you mean by create content?
Well, you can either create new leagues entirely, you can create content at the venues that already exist, you can create media content. There are things that one can do in terms of just being creative with ideas based on things that exist now or things that don't exist. And John, I'll give you one idea. I think that the world has just started but has not yet really embraced content that is changeable, it is virtual, that may not ever exist, that is contingent content, I would say. You know, there are a lot of ticket selling models now that are based on being able to buy into an event before you know what teams are going to be playing there. And if your teams go, you have an option to buy tickets, let's say, at face value. So a league could do that umpteen times over. The NCAA can do that with the Final Four. You're selling options to people who want to see certain schools, certain teams play, and you know that only 2 out of 30 or 60 or however many will make it, but you're still creating a revenue stream on that. Virtual signage on television, you could take a global brand that had multiple products and you could tailor advertising signage for each different territory based on the product that you want to introduce or sell into that territory. So I think that there's a huge amount of content that's still to be created.
Could you see virtual signage of advertisement on uniforms of baseball, football, or basketball players?
Eventually, absolutely, and with a different brand in a different language based on the territory where that broadcast is being sold in.
I think it's probably more against static, what is traditionally static. I'm not sure I see it on uniforms because it's not an advertisement. What we have seen is that just to answer that part of the question, to explore that, I think there's a difference between renting and buying an audience. I think that you can rent an audience from an advertising perspective, but from our perspective, that space on a uniform, it's not something you rent. It's something that you become a part of the DNA of that club or that team or whatever it is. So I would be very cautious about trying to change that from market to market to market.
Well, everybody looks to NASCAR, and they seem to do okay with it.
So I want to.
Soccer, I would say, is exponentially more valuable if you look at the Manchester United deal that they did with Chevy. At $600 million, I think it dwarfs anything that NASCAR has done, with no disrespect, who have a tremendous business. But clearly, when you look at the global aspect of it, I think that there are models out there that are a little bit different than NASCAR, some that are very similar. But there's a lot of revenue to be driven in that space because you really are sharing a real common bond in that sense.
If you take John's comment about a NASCAR driver, and you certainly see a lot of logos, and you think back to the way that signage was displayed in most arenas until quite recently, it was all static, and you had multiple brands at the same time and who were competing for the audience's eye. And those arenas, in large part, have gone to more digital signage, and the entire arena for a number of seconds or minutes will appear to be, owned for that time by one sponsor. And there's no reason why athletes and entertainers and teams and leagues with player association approval couldn't do the same thing, where an athlete for a period of time, rather than having 10 different patches, could be patched with just one company and then for another period of time by another company.
I'd go back to, I think, what you're alluding to, Kathy, though, is that when was the impetus for the change to digital, obviously the environment that we're in, but it's also because the team can make more money. Because the minute that you changed it from static to something that rotates every 3 minutes, now all of a sudden I don't have one sponsor there for the whole season. I have 25 sponsors and I just put more money in my pocket. What these organizations have to understand is that you're diluting the value then sometimes for the actual sponsor. And you have to keep recognizing the changes that you're making and always make sure that you're keeping your sort of partners / constituents in mind. So whether it's your TV partner, your athletic partner, your sponsor partner, you've got to keep all of these in mind because, again, if you put us and you offer us, you can be on the jersey for 10 minutes out of 90, we're going to take that. We're about owning something, being, like you said, Kathy, if we're going to be on the kit, we're going to be part of it, we're going to be part of that brand, we're going to own it, and I'm certainly not going to be in a retail space with somebody else on the kit, 3 aisles down from me.
So what analytics do you use to evaluate the value of 10 minutes versus 90 minutes versus 3 rows?
Yeah, absolutely. So you okay?
Go ahead.
I'll go into it?
This is great. I don't even have to work.
So one of the, it's a great question. And one of the things I think we've fallen into in the sports industry is you do get a lot of organizations that are going to sell analytics and be part of it. And I think for PepsiCo, $70+ billion company, it's incumbent on us to have our own analytics. No one knows our business better than we do. So we're not going to hire out in that sort of situation. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on sponsorship. So we're going to go well before just evaluating the 10 minutes. We actually have to start the equation back with any region, any country, in a model that we've just developed and rolled out over the last 18 months in its 3 phases, where we start at the top. It doesn't matter if you are Gatorade in Brazil or Walkers in the UK or Pepsi in China. Anybody in any region, any product of PepsiCo can use the model. And it's about setting your goals, objectives in phase 1. It's all based on analytics, so it's a very intensive model. And the first part of it is about demographics, and it involves the market share and the volume as you are in your position. The phase 2 then goes in and asks you about, you're evaluating a sponsorship. What else could you do besides that sponsorship? Where else could you spend the money? And there's a great deal of analysis behind your internal brand factors and the fit, and also the external factors such as fan base, viewership, attendance, things like that. So once you've decided with that you are going to actually invest in the sport, then to your point, the last phase of it is you have to do the right deal for where you are in the country, the brand that you represent, and the business model that you're trying to achieve. So often what we're finding is that, again, going back to you do a deal with an organization, it becomes transactional. You sign on the paper, they send you a bunch of information back. This is about actually approaching them prior and outlining, what does 10 minutes of value mean for us? And we'll actually go through, whether it's impressions or other things, and value. What does it mean for PepsiCo and the certain product that we're evaluating? But it's part of a larger model where we're looking at all of the assets that are coming in through that deal and that assessment.
Can you assess it relative to transactional results?
So we're almost there. You mean on the floor, pounds
Yeah.
on the, okay, so we're almost there. That's sort of the phase 4, which probably is going to be another 12 to 18 months out. But that's nirvana, right? We have to be able to know that because we did the sponsorship with Major League Soccer and we put their logos on our POS and our end caps, how many more pounds on the floor did we have? And more importantly, how much volume lift did we have, or share lift? So there are a couple layers to it which we're working on. The highest layer would be equity, which is just pretty simple. We could probably just add some questions into brand health studies related to sports and our specific properties. But then getting down deeper, there's a customer side of it. So did we get more shelf space? Did we get more advertisements, more couponing with that actual customer, Kroger, Walmart, or Tesco? And then the last piece of it is definitely, did you move? Did you actually turn product because of this? So this approach and this model is the closest that we have ever gotten to being able to answer that question, which is really, that's the key question that I don't think anyone's been able to sort of answer.
Well, let me turn this back to Kathy and George, because how often are you guys seeing sponsors taking this kind of analytical rigor to evaluating the sponsorships that they're taking with you guys? And if they aren't yet, are you helping them to get there? And if they are, how are you handling those questions or requests for, hey, help, like show me the impact?
I went first last time.
I'll go first, that's fine. What I would say, it varies. I mean, it varies by the level of sophistication that a client has. But that's where everybody's going. I mean, that's the entire why everybody's sitting in this audience, whether it be about player transactions or getting the most out of the athlete. I think that sports in general is moving in a direction where it is far more analytical than it used to be. I mean, it used to be that we were selling a sign in a stadium and a bunch of tickets, and that you really were selling people on the idea. Now it's a lot more, the rigor is much greater than it used to be. I think that's just one part of the discipline, though. I think the analytics that are now being placed across the board in sport is going to allow us to continue to grow the value of sport, because we're going to continue, I believe, to see that sports work, and that the fans continue to have an almost insatiable quest or thirst for a sport that they care about. And whether that be in my game of soccer, where it may be that they are fans of 7 clubs around the world, there's just an insatiable amount of desire to know more and more and more. So what Jenny's talking about from our perspective is kind of where the business is today and where it's headed in the future. But that's the same that can be said about, how are you getting a peak performance out of the athlete? And so the answer is simply yes. Of course, everybody is sitting at a table and saying, how do I know that this is the right investment and that the investment is getting the right return, whether that is a sponsor or that is a retail partner, a licensee, or it's a digital advertiser, or any other myriad of ways that your business is being touched and that we're generating greater amounts of revenue. So I think the analytics aspect of this is here to stay. And I think it's only going to get more and more rigorous.
So just before I give my answer, Jenny, I'd love to take a look at that after the panel.
By the way, we'll be trying to refute it the entire time they are looking at how it's going to work.
Hey, marketing nirvana is 12 months away.
Yeah.
There you go.
So,
exactly. So then,
Jessica, let's book that for next year.
Maybe I'll wait for the final version. Exactly. When we come back here next year, we'll take a look at it. But I believe that anytime you're looking at a major investment from somebody who's spending tens of millions of dollars, much less the kind of money Pepsi's spending annually in sponsorship, they're going to have a certain amount of analytical sophistication in the way they evaluate the property, and we see that. One thing I would say for this audience is whether it's making decisions about the team that we're putting on the field, or a player that's being taken in the draft, or whether it's devising a strategy to close a sponsorship deal, for a major sponsorship deal with a sophisticated partner, analytics is only going to be a piece of it. And you always want to be the person in the room who's willing to take a step back, or who's able to take a step back and say, okay, here's what the numbers show, but here are the other considerations that we want to that are going to come into play. And I would say, in the case of a company like Pepsi, I mean, you want to understand, as much as you can about who's making the decision, and just the competitive set and any other kind of dynamic. Is there anything else where there might be value there that you don't know about that the sponsor's looking at? And I think sometimes it's an analytics answer. And then sometimes it's an answer that you're going to get at from another way, but you want to be in that position where you're the person that can blend it.
You don't want analytics to confuse the communication or eliminate the communication, because in the end of the day, everybody here is trying to be a solutions provider.
Right.
And we all have different audiences, but the key is figuring out what everybody's objectives are and then aligning them. If you can find that alignment, that's the marketing nirvana.
So we've been circling a lot on this concept of globalization. All of you have talked about it. Phil, you pointed out, the U.S. only has 5% of the world's population. So my question is, how are you approaching the challenges and opportunities? I liked your concept of the digital sign or on jerseys, and potentially changing by country and language, and what are the other opportunities potentially out there?
Well, the first and biggest and most immediate opportunity is obviously media, because people around the world are consuming world-leading content in the form of a product or a sport viewership or whatever it may be. The world is becoming smaller, as we all proverbially say. The second area is taking brands globally. We advise athletes, but we also advise brands. Getting into new markets, sports is a historically very good way for many brands to penetrate a new market and audience and to create an image for themselves. And then the third way is the movement of talent. There are more leagues, more developmental opportunities, more training facilities, more people playing sports in more parts of the world. So they become inspired by the world's leading talent. More places can afford to have them come and visit. More talent go to a secondary market to extend their playing careers. And there's movement, I think, in all of those areas, in media, in sponsorship, consumer products, and in talent.
We would agree with that, obviously. I mean, listen, I happen to work in the global game, where there are more than 200 countries that start the qualification process for the World Cup. On any given, I think it's 220. There are almost that many leagues that actually exist around the world, although not at a high level. And when you actually look at the globalization of the sport of football, soccer, And I'll go back and forth on that and call American football, but it is the most widely distributed sport in the world. I saw a stat this morning that said there are only 36 days, I think it was, that there isn't a soccer game that's played on the planet. Wow. 36 days. So that there's not a game that's played on the planet, which actually surprised me. I thought it'd be less. But I think you're exactly right. We look at it from a media standpoint. The English Premier League today generates over $600 million in their international television distribution. And that number will grow well past $1 billion for rights outside of the United Kingdom. The Bundesliga, the German league, does over $100 million. So there's a lot of money to be generated out there in terms of the television content. We look at that as one of the great opportunities from a globalization perspective, and we don't have to teach the game outside of this country by any stretch. And so we look at it as we start to build out our 10-year vision, which we've recently kind of laid out, is that by 2022, we see that Major League Soccer will be among the best leagues in the world. And that's something that is a tall task, but by the same token, we think that the global aspect of the game is going to play a major role in that. And our ability to compete in markets beyond our borders will be critically important.
So a quarter of a century from inception of the league to...
We're aging in dog years, though.
John, obviously representing ESPN, how are you guys thinking about capitalizing on globalization, especially when we're talking about media as the primary driver and opportunity?
Oh, we just gonna kind of fish in there. We're not really trying to capitalize. But we do have on several different levels. We have judgments to make relative to rights of various sports in various countries, regions, areas, and that means some business decisions on top of that. We have coverage of these sports and the rise of what goes on. I think we demonstrated with the World Cup the last time around how you can really make a truly a global event an important American experience on television and even worldwide. I think that the coverage of the immersion of players from different areas or from different countries, different regions, different continents coming to the United States and establishing subcultures within sports where various ethnicities bond together and have a commonality, or where the disparate, we have a big investment in ESPN Deportes with the Hispanic audience and the disparate kinds of different experiences of different segments of the Hispanic population. So in our company, there's just a lot of different levels on which we're looking at what globalization means to us as a business.
All right, I'm going to switch it up a little bit and kind of go to some potential business obstacles. I'm going to start with, there's been obviously a lot of talk over the last year about performance-enhancing drugs and the impact of concussions. And from all of your perspective, how will this impact the image and potentially the economics of sport?
You should probably answer the question on concussions.
Nope, I'm the moderator.
Okay.
Phil, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're the one who's dealing with players on a most consistent basis. How are you advising them?
First, I'm going to make one comment about an area that's a threat that you didn't mention, which maybe we'll come back to, and I think that's gambling and the integrity of sport. Sure. It's also the biggest potential new revenue driver for sport when done right. Performance-enhancing drugs, the latest studies show that 20% of us think that they're okay at the professional level, which is a shockingly high number compared to a decade or two ago, and probably just the beginning of a trend. And it's really a societal issue and a measure, analytical in a way, of what society thinks about certain kinds of behaviors. The Romans used to drug their horses in chariot races in ancient history. Now you could be a baseball hitter with 20/20 vision, but you want to get a little bit of a competitive edge, so you can have LASIK surgery to make your vision 20/10. You could be a pitcher who's aging, losing a little bit off of his fastball, or a pitcher who's injured, and needs to rehab his throwing arm, or a pitcher who's perfectly healthy. And in any of those cases, if you have Tommy John surgery, that's okay. But taking your own blood and oxygenating it and putting it right back into your body is not okay. You can be anorexic, but you can't take a diuretic. These are societal decisions that we all make. I think there's going to be continued evolution, because you can run on carbon fiber legs, but there are other things that you're not allowed to do. So it's an interesting area. I don't think it threatens sport ultimately, but I do think that sport needs to keep up with societal values.
I think one of the most popular things that, one of the important things for leagues in protecting their brands is to be on the right side of these issues like PEDs, concussions, gambling. I think that they go to the integrity of the game, and I think if you're a commissioner, or if you're a senior manager at a league, you know that you're going to poll very bad if you're out of line with your fan base on an issue like that, and you're going to poll very well if you're in line with your fan base. And I think it's kind of an indicator for thinking of yourself as a brand manager. I mean, I think that's what the leagues have really gotten to. If you look at baseball, it's incredibly important for baseball to be viewed as on the right side on PEDs. They're being viewed as, probably over the last 10 years haven't been slow to get to the issue. And so it's a critical thing for baseball today. And I think it drives a lot of the dialogue around it. Same thing with this year's Hall of Fame class, and you had Clemens, you had Bonds, and you had we had Jeff Bagwell, and Clemens had played for the Astros late in his career, and it threw a wrench into the entire Hall of Fame vote. Biggio's a guy who probably should have got in first time, didn't make it, had the highest vote total, very close to making it. It's changing the nature of the conversation. And I think it's very important for leagues to be on top and out in front of that. And I think the same thing for the organizations within the league.
I think you bring up some pretty incredible points just in terms of the public perception, which is sort of an entirely different part of the conversation. But I think you're exactly right. I think that the challenge for any league from a PED standpoint is to make sure that you've established what your rules are, you have the right mechanisms to determine whether or not there is anything that is occurring that is against those rules, and that you act accordingly. And I think that's probably what occurred as we look back and historically, is that there wasn't enough adherence, if you will, to the competition standards. When I look at concussions, that's a whole different kettle of fish, so to speak. And that's something that is, I think, a real challenge for all of us. But I think the game needs to change at some level. And all of our games need to change at some level. And there needs to be a protection of young children, perhaps in the concussion arena specifically, where perhaps the rules need to evolve for younger players until they are at a level that they understand how to participate in a game that allows, and that they're a little bit more protected perhaps. And that the protocols then from a professional perspective need to protect the athlete as well. But those are things that the leagues need to continue to take seriously and ultimately establish what are those lines in the sand, so to speak. And then there just needs to be a way to deal with that, whether it's from a competitive standpoint or athlete health perspective, that you're maintained a vigilance about. And I think that there was a period of time in all of sport where vigilance perhaps was not as important as perhaps the victory on the field.
I think following the rules, whatever they are, is incredibly important. We just have to make sure that the rules are set in a way that's modern and fair and to the tastes of the public. Sports can lead in that area. Sports is also a little bit of a follower in that area. When you get to the violence issue, the concussions issue, I think that human beings have this unimaginable appetite for violence. If you look at mixed martial arts and ultimate fighting and go back again to ancient Rome and the gladiators, we seem to be willing as viewers to want that kind of programming. And there will always be people who are willing to take a risk that they aren't going to be one of the unfortunates who don't survive very well or get paid enough that they're willing to even become less abled later on in life. So I'm not sure that violence will change our appetite for sports.
From a media perspective, I think that there are, for both of these issues, PEDs and concussions, there is a past history which sports are trying to grapple with, whether there's 3,000 to 4,000 player lawsuits in the NFL, whether it's the voting for halls of fame, and they're trying to sort that out. And right now in the present, I think that with PEDs, there's a certain amount of public uproar enough to talk about what everybody said in the panel, which is the fans of the sports really want you to pay attention to it. So officials in the sports are doing it. With respect to concussions, we are in a phase now of a deep immersion into research. We have a big research project at the University of North Carolina. We have the University of Pittsburgh. We have UCLA. We have right here in Boston, Dr. Cantu and Dr. McKee. We have the NIH with millions of dollars from the NFL in funding. And I don't know that all of this is going to come to a cohesive or a manageable, understood, where there's some agreement, because it's everything that I read on the subject. There are nuances and differences of opinions and different kinds of research that are going on. But I think in the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to see enough research that we'll be able to make different judgments on. And I do think that on both of these issues, that they do have the attention right now of the people in decision-making positions in all of sports, so that where change is necessary, and I agree with you, Kathy, about the youth of the country with respect to violence in sports. I think that you're going to see change happen in whatever way these officials think is going to help encourage people to stay with the game. I mean, it's kind of discouraging to hear at this conference a couple of people say, well, football in 50 years, if it's here. You know, I don't, I think that there's a lot of people, doomsayers out there who are looking at the worst case scenarios, but there are parents who are withholding their children from participating in these sports because I don't think that there is enough concentration and paying enough attention to the recommendations of a Dr. Cantu about the 14-year-olds. And we'll see what happens.
Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty. I accidentally turned off the iPad. We're going to take some questions that have come in via Twitter. And as I acclimate to these, I'm going to ask one more question. So athlete recruitment has trickled down to the high school and even the early teenage years. I'm going to direct this to you, Jenny.
Oh, please don't. Okay.
Well, I mean, how do you think about this top talent? And when you're going to think about potentially sponsoring them? Phil, you're going to jump in on this too. When they potentially, especially with social media, can have maybe 1 million followers before they even get to college.
Right. I think the key to understand is that we do nothing to put us in the way of any NCAA or any guidelines. So let me set it out by saying that. We're very good and we stay within the lines. But what I would say is especially on the Gatorade front, right? We all know those Gatorade athletes that have been, with us for so long, the Michaels, the Mias, Peytons. And it's a very rigorous process. And, I'm sure he's familiar with it and worked with us on it on many athletes through the years. The fact is, Gatorade wants to be that brand and is that brand that is, again, fueling the athletic performance. So it's not about finding what's hot and then partnering with that person. It's actually going in at a very early level and starting to talk to, athletic directors, coaches, people at those levels that know these athletes, and that's why we have a lot of partnerships with Gatorade, whether it's high school associations, college associations, people that are partnering with us, not only on innovation and what's new in sport, what's new in athlete performance, but truly talking about the athletes. And I guess one of the greatest programs we do have, which has funneled a lot of the best athletes in the world, has been the Gatorade Athlete of the Year program, which is in so many sports, the high school athletes of the year that get recognized throughout the year, and then one person is sort of named at the end. So I think the answer to your question is there's a lot of rigor behind the process. It becomes more so as athletes are getting more out there more quickly. And it's interesting because you have to be careful if you're on the athlete side, and I'm sure that you counsel a lot of folks within the organization of protecting yourself and making sure that you still are maintaining your own brand, and that you're not sort of putting yourself in a position where sponsors may not want to work with you.
Right, which is harder and harder to do the further you are away from a real career. So when you are making decisions now about an athlete participating competitively at a younger and younger age, the brands like Pepsi are very smart in how they analyze things. But for all of us, there's an expectation that we're going to be able to make decisions as well with younger athletes as we could with older athletes, and it's just not the case. There is going to be, prenatal decision making for sponsorships pretty soon, and we even consider that one day we'll have an obstetrician on our staff and go to parents and say, you know what, we predict, because our analytics tell us that you're extremely likely to have a star child, and our obstetrician will guarantee to only deliver star babies.
We're guessing that Peyton and Eli's children are thumbs up, so we're looking for those children in the next 15 years.
Jessica, as you know, we have a 6-month-old grandson, so we're expecting that first scholarship offer letter in the mail any day now.
Are you looking for the Gatorade sponsorship or Pepsi? Which
we'll take it all.
Okay. Frito-Lay? Okay.
All right, so here's a couple questions. George, the first one is to you. What business challenges are unique to the NBA versus Major League Baseball, and what challenges are universal?
That's a good question.
I would say the biggest challenge that baseball has, and the common challenge that they have is probably making teams profitable. And I think baseball this round, and it tends to go in cycles, is a little bit in a slightly better position because they have a consensus around a broader revenue sharing program, and the NBA is definitely moving in the right direction with their last deal because they've introduced a little broader revenue sharing. Which does a nice job of making it possible for more franchises to actually generate an operating profit, which I think is only getting more important as we get into a position where asset values are not appreciating across all businesses the way that they were before, and the same thing will be true of sports. In terms of what's unique about the sports, or unique challenges that they face. I think baseball, just as we're talking about some of these issues like PEDs, it's a very serious issue in baseball because of the nature of the brand and the nature of the connection between the fan base and the sport is one that's steeped in tradition and nostalgia and Americana. And there's something un-American about cheating, and so the fans really hold the sport to a very high standard. And there's it's part and parcel with the way that the sport is positioned is almost a religion that you're going to be held to a very high standard around issues like that. And I think that that's been a challenge. I think that baseball continues to grapple with. For the NBA, they have the right demographic in the arenas. They have the demographic you want. They have that high-income demographic, and it's about the broadening it. It's about pulling more people in and finding ways to do that. I think that's something that it's a little bit different from what baseball is grappling with.
Would any of you guys like to talk about your own experiences dealing with the various leagues that you are dealing with and interacting with?
John, I thought John is, I've heard you're a baseball fan, but I haven't heard you talk about baseball much today, so.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, just chiming in on
I mean, we got a pool on, you know, a team pool on team wins for the year, so I'm picking your team.
That's good. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But I guess the question would be, what do you think the unique challenges are that baseball faces going forward?
I think that their national marketing, you know, they have breakthrough stars like Trout last year, and I think getting his visibility and his attractiveness, he had just an amazing year, offensively and defensively, and I don't think America really saw as much of Trout as they could have or should have. I think that the instant replay in the game is something that could be a step forward for the fan experience and the credibility and integrity of the game in this age of replay. And I think that the narrative stories of the Strasburgs and the Harpers and the Nationals and the surprises. The one thing about you can always count on with baseball is in April and May, you'll have a big surprise from people where you didn't expect it, and you'll have new stars coming into the game. And I think one of the challenges is for baseball to be aware and present them in as aggressive a way as possible. I also think that it's difficult. I think that the leagues should be with their media partners, and I don't mean ESPN with this, but I think when the leagues, whether it's the NFL network, the NBA network, or MLB network, they all do a really good job. But I think that the nature of the relationship with those networks, with the Turners and the ESPNs of the world and the Foxes of the world, should be altered a little bit. I think the real model and a really difficult time for me personally, the passing of Steve Sabol, because NFL Films was the real model of what an arm of promotion can be for a league, and a real partnership and a real level of quality of the things that NFL Films did. And I think that the leagues ought to think about jiggering their relationships to reflect more of a partnership with an NFL Films type entity where quality is over quantity. So those are three things. Well,
the next question is actually going to you, and it's about the potential oversaturation of sports, in particular by ESPN, and in general on TV. It's a question for you. How close are we to it?
Well, we're the same we were a year ago, or the same we were 2 years ago. It's, you know, if you put it on the air, they will come. And we see increases in viewership. We see a great deal of interest in our games. And live sports, as our skipper, Mr. Skipper, says, are, you know, the most sought after commodity in the age of media that we're in right now. And I don't think that there's, I mean, I mentioned earlier that there was an untapped appetite for sports fandom. And I just see it incrementally. You know, we have, right now, certainly the people at Comcast didn't decide to start a cable network because they thought there was oversaturation. The people at CBS didn't decide to start a cable network. Fox is supposed to be launching 2 new cable networks in August. So I think people in the media are seeing an underserved fandom as opposed to an overserved fandom.
Well, I do want to touch a little bit on the fans because we haven't talked much about them. I know Fanalytics was earlier today, but if you guys could provide some perspective on the new and emerging technologies that are allowing us to improve the fan experience. What are your thoughts on what's ahead, both in stadium, at home?
Well, I'll kick off that because in a lot of respects, we look at it a little less about innovation and actually a little bit more about participation. And by that I mean, and John commented on this in the initial statement that he made at the beginning, we look at it that the fans actually create the environment in our stadiums. And so the fans and their enthusiasm for the sport, they become a part of the game. In fact, they bring, and our supporters groups bring the actual environment and the atmosphere to the stadium, which is very much more so about being a part of a group and actually cheering your team on, and probably more akin to what we see domestically in college sports. And we think that's important because it's a real reason to be in the stadium and a real reason to come there as opposed to watch on the couch. And we think it's a real point of difference for the sport of soccer, whereas many of our other colleagues are grappling with those that are decreasing the amount of games that they attend because they'd rather watch on the couch and be able to see the red zone or be able to see the replays and things of that nature. By the same token, I think we have to stay a step ahead of that and not take for granted that atmosphere from our standpoint is what is going to drive the connection between the fan and the game in stadium at all times. So I think that innovation continues, and it's how and what can you have your fans, how more and how deeper can they get to really be able to integrate with your sport. For us, that may be the introduction of My Coach, which is a Adidas-based system which will allow for tracking to actually occur on the athletes eventually, actually during play of games. So you'll be able to get to a point where you actually can track whether it's how far the athletes are running or what the speed of the pace of play and things like that. So how can we actually provide them with more interaction with the sport? I think there were some things that were talked about earlier today about opening up data. I think we talked about that a little bit as well. I mean, so there's any myriad of things, but at the end of the day, we got to make sure we don't get away from that which is most important, which is fans love your game because they want to cheer, and they actually have a real passion for the team that plays on the field of play. If we get ourselves so far down the line that it's about delivering a Pepsi in the stadium or interacting with the game and the replays, we may lose that core of what it is that we do, which is actually the actual definition of fan, which is the piece that we've got to make sure we don't lose sight of.
Wasn't Mark Cuban the one a couple of years ago that was quoted as saying that he actually made a decision not to do something in his stadium with handheld devices because if you're doing this, you're not watching them up and down the court?
Eyes up, eyes down.
Yeah.
I mean, the stadiums can't compete with the home viewing experience anymore. It's cheaper and it's easier to watch at home. So I think you need to make the live experience as different from a technological experience as you possibly can. And the community feeling, which has always been very important about the in-stadium experience, is now being transferred to social media, where you have people who are traveling more than ever, living in more places than ever. You've got expanded fan bases who keep in contact with each other in real time on social media during games. And I think that's a real challenge for all the leagues and teams to look at going forward and how to enhance the in-stadium experience to get people to want to come.
But don't you think, I mean, Neil Glatt said in the Fanalytics session earlier today, he said half of the games people are watching from home because they're away. So aren't people used to, or fans used to, being able to see replays whenever they want? I mean, isn't that something that needs to be happening in the stadium or arena?
I think the NFL's position is a little bit unique because, I mean, the television audiences are so large, and because there's so few games, and red zone being, I mean, it's a very powerful product, and that experience, I mean, I don't know how you could create that experience in the stadium. So I think you have to attack it in other ways. I think everybody's got it. The issue that I think everybody has is, you can't get online in a stadium that's full because there's too many people in the stadium, and I think we've got to address that. And you've got to find an economic model around it, and it's really just if it costs $120 million to wire 30 baseball stadiums, how are you going to pay for it? But I mean, you have to do it because even if it's a great experience in the stadium, I mean, we are kind of becoming people who we just don't feel comfortable being disconnected. So, I think it's a bunch of different issues that sometimes get mashed together, but in baseball, I think what they're most focused on, BAM, is most focused on upgrading all the facilities, and they do it, when there's a World Series in a market, or when there's an all-star game in a market, and they're working their way through the venues, and they're partnering with, the wireless companies, to pay for the infrastructure development. Part of it is about improving the experience in the stadium, but part of it is just getting rid of that problem where you can't get online. I don't think we really want to encourage people to be online, to kind of Mark Cuban's point, in the stadium. But I mean, taking it away from them, I think is a way to keep them out. At the end of the day, I like Kathy's point about, you know, genuine experiences between, you know, of rooting for the team in a group. That's what we've got to celebrate. That's what we've got to sell. That's what we've got to convince people, you know, to continue value doing.
One thing about the TV experience, I think we're getting very close to real interactive TV. And we're going to see more of better resolution on the smaller screens of video, and we're going to see more of internet content on TV and true integration.
All right, this is going to be our last question. Phil, as promised, what's the role of gambling and the importance moving forward for sports? And there's cocktails waiting outside, so.
Okay, really quick.
Keep it short.
No pressure.
Very quickly, outside the United States, particularly in Europe, gambling provides a major and normal revenue source in many sports where there is a gambling partner affiliated with the television broadcaster, and in real time you can make bets. Over time, I think that it is likely to come to the United States and other areas as well. We already have lotteries that use licenses with the leagues and other talent. There is so much money in it that as long as it's regulated and as long as you maintain the integrity of the game, which is the common thread that I think we all need to be working on. And one quick digression, you know, so much of our lives is now about business and then our personal life that I think we've lost a sense of the importance of a community life. And that's what teams do so well, and that's where companies like Pepsi can enhance an experience, and that's where media like ESPN can also enhance an experience. But we can't become a totally technological, completely unsocial society because a lot of the fabric of what we all try to celebrate, I think, is going to disappear. And gambling, performance-enhancing drugs, injuries, player safety, and health, I think are critically important issues that I hope will all emerge to the fore and become drivers where sport can create a positive difference. But in the long run, I think gambling will be regulated. I think it'll be available. And I think you're going to be able to bet on all kinds of esoteric things like, is Roger Federer's next serve going to go to the backhand or the forehand? Is the return going to go into the net or long or wide? You'll be able to bet quickly on so many things. And those kinds of bets in real time, as opposed to will a team win, are very hard, I think, to become corrupted, because you've got a very broad base of people who might be betting very small amounts of money, and it's probably relatively safe for leagues and teams while being a good revenue source.
I got to say, not for nothing, because it's a whole nother panel, I disagree with that. And I think it's probably the most, it's probably the biggest threat to a quality of play, equality, that we face in sport. I actually think that we've got to think long and hard before we allow. There has been there have been recent incidents of whether it be match fixing, and you bring up tennis, which is probably one of the sports that is most focused on as it relates to betting irregularities. I just think it's something we've got to be very, very cautious of. Regulations are one thing, but to me, it could potentially become a bigger threat than just having another revenue stream.
I don't know what you were disagreeing with, because my first sentence was, I think it's the biggest threat to sports.
Fair enough, but you say we're going to see it.
I think that when we're not betting on outcomes of games.
I'm sorry, I'm disagreeing with the fact that you say that the Roger Federer and the serve going to the left is less likely to have corruption. And I think we've seen already incidents where that is not actually an accurate sort of statement. And I'm not suggesting, so I think we're agreeing. I'm disagreeing on the one point.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Cocktails. We're agreeing on cocktails.
Yeah, fair enough.
Let's thank our wonderful and esteemed panelists. Thank you guys very much.